Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Shruti Smriti Puranana Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Pada Shankaram Loka Shankaram Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Paramananda Madhavam. Let's read the verses we completed in the last session. Starts from Sada Sarvagato.
17th. Sada sarvagatopyatma na sarvatravabhasate buddhavevavabhaseta swacheshu pratibimbavat dehendriyamano buddhi prakritibhyo vilakshanam tadvrittih sakshinam vidyat Atmanam rajavat sada vyapriteshvindriyeshvatma vyapari va vivekinam drishyate bhreshu dhavatsu dhavanniva yathaa shashi atmachaitanyamashritya dehendriyamanodhiyah स्वक्रियार्थेषु वर्तन्ते सूर्यालोकं यथा जनाः देहेन्द्रियगुणान् कर्माणि अमले सच्चिदात्मनि अध्यस्यन्त्यविवेकेन गगने नीलतादिवत् अज्ञानान्मानसोपाधेः कर्तृत्वादीनि चात्मनि कल्प्यन्तेऽम्बुगते चन्द्रे चलनादि यथाम्भसः.
Right. So, we have a very important concept. And what is that? Even though the self is all-pervasive, always, all-pervasive, always, sada sarvagataha api. Nevertheless, we don't have the expression of the self as an individual, the awareful being, the conscious entity everywhere. Such a thing happens only where there is mind and intellect. Why? Mind and intellect has a capacity to catch the reflection of consciousness. That reflected consciousness is called jiva, the individual, I and you. Consciousness is one, all-pervasive. But reflections can be many. Reflections are many. So here you have you, I have I, there you have him, So many beings. Now, here also you have book, but you don't call this book an individual. Is it because Satchidananda is not there? Satchidananda is there. Is it because body is not there? We don't call body. Is it because gross, physical? No, it is there. But what is lacking here? Mind and intellect is lacking. In the mind and intellect occurs the reflection of consciousness, and that reflected consciousness is the individual. In Sanskrit, jiva. Technical term. In other words, this mental I that we feel, this individual, there's a mind-based I. Good, bad, I'm so and so, I'm such and such person. We have an idea of ourselves, right? The idea of ourselves, that ideated I. I'm using several different words. The I which is part of this scheme of ideation, of thought. The karta bhokta, the individual. I am doing this, I have my plans, I have my goals. All those I when we say. Actually we speak about this only as I and we forget our nature as true Satchidananda. If any one of you is called and then you are asked to give a brief, in any interview and all, first tell me briefly about yourself. Then how do we start? I was born in, I come from such a family, I have such an education, I went to such a place earlier for work. Now who is this I we are talking? Are we talking of I as Satchidananda? No. We are talking about the individual I. And that individual I is not here. For the only reason that there is no mind and intellect. This is a very important concept. And what is the example given? Swacheshu pratibimbavat. Even though light is everywhere, falls everywhere, nevertheless, where there is a transparent surface to accept that light and present it as a reflection, there you find as a reflection. Not everywhere you find a perfect reflection. Where there's a mirror, it catches the sun's reflection. Sun's light is everywhere, but a mirror catches the reflection. In the same way, that pure I is caught in the mental pool and becomes the individual I. The pure I of the nature of Satchidananda is caught in the mental reflecting pool and it becomes the individual I, which is termed the jiva, I and you. The pure self is different from the deha, indriya, mana, buddhi, meaning all the three shariras, all the five koshas. It is very different. Not only is it different, it is the mere witness of all the activities of the upadhis. You understand the word upadhis? Upadhis means what? The conditioning. What are the conditionings? Either you consider them as a shariratraya or you consider them as a panchakosha. The self, Satchidananda. I'm not talking of the individual self now. I'm talking of the pure self. How is the pure self? The pure self is distinct from all these upadhis and is a enabler of the activities of the upadhis because it is the original consciousness. It is a source consciousness. When that source consciousness, Satchidananda, reflects on the mental pool, it becomes the individual, and that very reflection enables the upadhis with capacity to function. Otherwise they are inert. The inert cannot function without the support of consciousness. That consciousness, immediately that consciousness is reflected consciousness for the upadhis. But even reflected consciousness comes from where? From the original consciousness. That original consciousness is you, is me, is the self. But reflected here the upadhis get the capacity to function. Now the mind and intellect is not here, and therefore reflection is not happening. And because reflection is not happening, there is no capacity for this book by itself to get up and walk away. How many times, Swamiji, you will take me? I'm fed up of you. The book does not say and get up and walk away. Why? Because it cannot function. Why it cannot function? Is it not Satchidananda there? Satchidananda is there, but Satchidananda does not manifest as the individual I, enabling awareness, consciousness at this level of the upadhis. Are you getting this concept? And that enabling consciousness, in whose presence everything happens, that is like what? Raja-vatsada. It's like a king. It's like a king means what? In the presence of the king, without the king doing anything, everything happens by its mere presence. In Sanskrit we use an expression, sannidhi matrena. Sannidhi. Sannidhi means mere. Sannidhi means presence. Sannidhi matrena means what? By its mere presence. It's not doing anything. In its mere presence, everything happens. Another example given was what? The sun. When the sun rises, meaning in the mere presence of the sun, the whole cosmos goes to action. Mere presence. And when these upadhis go into action, fools, avivekis, those who have not got the crystal clear comprehension, those who have not understood things properly, the matter, what the facts of the things they have not understood, what do they think? They think the self is acting. In the presence of the self, everything acts, but because of their action, what happens? They think that the self is acting. That is verse number 19. The example is beautiful. Dhavanniva yathaa shashi. Drishyate abreshu dhavatsu. When the clouds are moving, what happens? We think because we see the moon through the medium of the moving clouds. The clouds are moving. Just because the clouds are moving, it doesn't mean that the moon is moving. The mistake is what? The mistake is we are seeing the moon through the medium of the clouds. Suppose we go above the clouds, then this illusion will not be there. Seeing the moon through the medium of the moving clouds, it appears as though the moon also is moving. In the same way, we look at ourselves through the medium of the functioning body, mind, intellect, senses, pranas, and then we say what? I am a man. Then I look at it myself from the medium of the state. Then I say, I belong to this state. I look at myself from the medium of the mind. I say, today I'm slightly disturbed. I look at the medium of the intellect and say, I am not able to follow. I understand. I don't understand. I look at the medium of through the belief system and then I say, I am so and so. I look at the medium of caste and creed and I say in a certain way. Looking at myself through the medium. But when you rise above and you look at yourself as yourself, you are free of any of these limitations. Space by itself is colorless. Space by itself has no shape. Nevertheless, because of the particles which disperse the light, we consider space today it's very cloudy space, bright space, blue space. All these things, how are they coming? They're all superimpositions upon space. Space by itself is just space, pure space. You can't even see it. It's just space. You can be aware of it, but you can't see it. But then we speak of blue space, bright space, dark space. All these things are how they are all imaginations. In the same way, the various properties, the nature of the upadhis are all superimposed upon the self. That was the next example. Gagani Neelata-divat. So many examples to show how the self is pure, untouched and free of the upadhis. One more example. What is this example? Ambugate chandre chalanadihi yathaa ambasaha. Water is moving, but then we say that the moon is broken. The water is going up and down. The waters are what? The waters are polluted and therefore dark. And then we say the moon is not, the moon has no light. What is there in the water we superimpose on the moon. Light is light. Light can never become dark. Light can never become broken. It is just light. But the waves are moving, and then we say, the moon is broken. You know, here we have this Ayyappa temple, right? Have you gone to the Ayyappa temple? There is light, sometimes they light 1008 lamps around it. Have you seen any time it has happened here, when you are here? No, not yet. That reflected light will fall on the pond there. It's an amazing experience. 1008 lamps, and then you have the reflection there. And when the waters are all still, you see that reflection so beautifully. And when the water, for example, is, let's say, because of wind or something, then you see all the lights are moving. Lights are not moving. Lights appear to be moving. In the same way, the various notions of I do, I walk, I sit, all those things are put on the self. It is not I do. The pure consciousness never does. The pure consciousness never speaks. The pure consciousness never thinks. The pure consciousness never feels happy. The pure consciousness never feels sad. But then I always say, I am happy, I am sad, I am this, I am that. The activities of the upadhis are superimposed on the self. Really speaking, likes, dislikes, nothing belongs to the self. Can you prove it? Yes, we will prove it for you logically. Likes, dislikes, meaning so many things of the mind we say, no? See, body is one thing. So many things of the mind we put on ourselves. I'm a happy-go-lucky guy. Happy-go-lucky guy. I'm a self-made person. I'm smart. I'm sharp. Like that I pretend for others. So many things we tell about ourselves based on the mind. In fact, likes and dislikes are so strong and have such a powerful impact on our life. We divide the whole world into like, dislike. And then we live our life buffeted by likes and dislikes. Raaga-icchhaa. Raga is attachment. Icchha is desire. Opposite of raga is dvesha. It's not mentioned here. Raaga-icchhaa-sukha-duhkha-aadi, like that. So you have raga, attachment. You have icchha, desire. You have sukha, joy. Dukkha, sorrow. All these things are only, we keep on living our life connected with this. I am happy, I am sad. How are you? Suppose we meet. How are you? How are you? You are meant to say, I am all well. That's all you are supposed to say. Suppose you ask somebody, how are you? And the fellow tells the whole story. You say, leave me now, I will go now. How are you? He tells the whole, I have to go now. Please leave me now. So all our life is lived through the mind. Let us read the verse now, verse number 23.
Raaga-icchhaa-sukha-duhkha-aadi buddhau satyaam pra-vartate sushuptau nasti naashe tasmaat buddhestu Aatmanah.
Beautiful. How do we understand? Suppose when we say, raga means attached. No? Attachment is what attachment is? Attachment is little more than love. Love is you love somebody. You feel, you care for that person is love. Attachment is what? I care for you, I love you, but you better exactly do as I say. Meaning, you have to contribute to my happiness. That's called attachment. Or where we demand upon the other person to contribute to our happiness, that is called attachment. There is love. But attachment is what? When you try to make the other person a slave of your wishes, that is called attachment. So attachment has got this, where you want to make the other person do certain things in the way you want. In other words, actually what is happening is that you are becoming a slave to the other person. You think that you want to make the other person contribute to your happiness. In other words, what is happening? You want that person. In other words, what has happened? You have become dependent in that relationship. To make the other person do what we want is a dependence on the other person. And sometimes it becomes so suffocating for the other person. Leave me alone. I want my space. All kinds of expressions are used there. Raga. Icchha, desire. And if the raga, if the attachment and the desire go together. You cannot have attachment without desire. When the attachment, desire goes together and the attachment, the desire is fulfilled, what will be there? Sukha. You're so sweet. Huh? You're so sweet. Sukha. I have done so much for you and you do nothing. Dukkha. In other words, this is our whole life. Raaga-icchhaa-sukha-duhkha-aadi. And then we say, I am happy, I am sad, I love you, I hate you, all these expressions we use. All these things, do they actually belong to you? Even though you are saying, I love, I hate, I... Yuck. Sometimes they use the word yuck. That is called hate in the worst form. Yuck. Nowadays people don't say like and all those things. I love you. I don't like it. Earlier, we used to say, I don't like it. I hate it. Everything is a big thing. What do you... I hate idli. Why do you say I hate idli? I don't like idli. The idli is okay. There is one thing comes like a tube or something. I don't know how to eat it also. It's called puttu. Have you eaten that puttu? Has it come? Puttu has come? Have they given you? Not yet. It will come. One day it will come. It's a very, very wonderful dish. You should know how to eat, otherwise you won't enjoy. Nevertheless, why am I telling all those things? Raaga-icchhaa-sukha-duhkha-aadi. They don't belong to me. How? Proof. What is the proof? Buddhau satyaam pra-vartate. When your mind and intellect is there, all these expressions are there. In deep sleep, when the mind and intellect are not functioning, you don't find the expression of this like, dislike, love, hate, and all those kind of things. Now waking state. Self is there, mind and intellect also is there. And then you have the experience of attachment, love, hate, all those things. Now we want to know, see, two things are there. Self is there, mind and intellect is there. Experience of Raaga-icchhaa-sukha-duhkha-aadi, everything is there. Now, where it belongs? Does it belong to the self or does it belong to the mind intellect? How do we find out? What is the proof? Let us see if the mind and intellect is not there, whether they are there. Then we will know where exactly they belong to. Mind and intellect, when it is not there? Sometimes is it not there? In deep sleep it is not there. In deep sleep when mind and intellect is not there, you don't have the experience of attachment, desire, joy, sorrow. That means what? Where do they actually belong? Do they belong to this? In deep sleep, self is there. Self is illumining the absence of everything. Self is there. Self is illumining the absence of mind and intellect. In deep sleep, no thoughts. How do you know no thoughts? There were no thoughts. There were no thoughts. If you are able to recall that there are no thoughts when you were sleeping, if you were to recall, how can you recall without having experience? If you had experience, how can you not be there? You had an experience and you are recalling later on. I saw there were no thoughts when I was sleeping. You are able to recall. If you are recalling, that means you are experiencing. If you are experiencing, that means you are there. Self was there in deep sleep. Mind and intellect were not there. And at that time, did you feel any attachment? I am very deeply attached to my friend or mother, father. Okay, whatever. Attached. In deep sleep, was attachment there? No. Was joy there? No. Was sorrow there? No. You were there. Mind and intellect was not there. In waking state, you are there. Mind and intellect also is there. Then you have the experience of attachment, desire, joy, sorrow, love, hate, so many things. So where do they actually belong to? Do they belong to the self or do they belong to the mind and intellect? They belong to the mind and intellect. This logic is called Anvaya-vyatireka. Co-presence, co-absence. Anvaya, co-presence, co-absence. So see co-presence, see co-absence and find out where they belong. All right. Raaga-icchhaa-sukha-duhkha-aadi buddhau satyaam pra-vartate sushuptau sushuptau naashe. Naashe means what? Buddhi naashe. When the buddhi is not there, in sushupti, what happens? You don't have the experience of all these things. Therefore, tasmaat, buddheh, they all belong to buddhi. They all belong to buddhi, they all belong to the mind intellect. They are all thoughts, they are all thought based. They are not essential to you. Na Atmanah. What is our nature, true nature? If Raaga-icchhaa-sukha-duhkha are not my true nature, what is my true nature? Next verse.
Prakaashah toyasya shaityam agneh ushnataa swabhaavah sat-chid-amshah nitya-nirmalat Aatmanah.
One more time, shall we read? Prakaashah toyasya
shaityam agneh ushnataa
swabhaavah sat-chid-amshah
nitya-nirmalat Aatmanah.
Arkasya Prakaashah, the effulgence of the sun. Arka is sun. The effulgence of the sun. Toyasya shaityam. Toya means water. Shaityam. Shaityam, coolness. The effulgence of the sun. Okay? Sun, arka, effulgence. Toya, water, coolness. Agneh, fire, ushna, heat. Yathaa, swabhaavah, how they are all nature. It is the nature of the fire to be hot. It is the nature of sun to be effulgent. It's a nature. It is essential to it. It is the nature of the water to feel cool. You may heat it, but again it will become cool. It's a nature. It is nature. You can't take it away from that. It is there. In the same way, Atmanah, for yourself, for you, your nature. You know what is your nature? Sat, chit, ananda, nitya-nirmalata. This is your nature. Sat, existence. The sense of being. That's called sat, being. Chit, consciousness. It can never go away. In deep sleep also it will never go away. In deep sleep also you are illumining the absence of all thoughts. Ananda. Ananda is the completeness, that fullness. That is the nature. Nitya, eternal. Nirmalata, ever being free of any kind of contamination coming through the upadhis. You are free. This is the self's nature. Prakaashah arkasya toyasya shaityam agneh ushnataa swabhaavah sat-chid-amshah. Swabhaavah, true nature. This is your nature. Swabhaavah, one's nature. Bhavaha is nature. Swabhaavah, one's own nature. Swabhaavah. Swabhaavah satchidananda nitya-nirmalata. Atmanah swabhaavah. Okay, the simple words, I am not going to explain much. Next come some very, very, what can I say, some deep ideas. So we have to read 3 verses together and see them at one flow. Alright? 3 verses in one flow we have to see. So please read all the verses.
Atmanah sat-chid-amshah buddhir vrittih dvayam samyojya cha vivekena janamiti pra-vartate Atmano vikriya nasti buddhir bodho na jatviti jivas sarvamalam nyatva nyata drashteti muhyati Rajju-sarpa-vat Atmanam jivam nyatva bhayam vahet naham jivah paratmeti nyatasche-nirbhayo bhavet.
Anybody who has studied Atmabodha, suppose you want to know whether they have really understood Atmabodha, you have to ask, tell me the meaning of these 3 verses. If that person is able to explain the meaning of these 3 verses, and you can say, this person has studied Atmabodha. Any verse the person can explain, but if these 3 verses they can't explain, please understand they have not got the essence of Atmabodha. So in other words, these 3 verses are core verses. And they are also subtle. Never say Vedanta is difficult. You can use the word subtle. What do you mean subtle? You have to not just understand, you have to apply it to yourself and understand. That's called subtle. What you are studying, you should not just study like this, like an objective science. Because it is subjective science. You apply it to yourself and you see, does it make sense? That's called subtle. Okay? Now what is it? Before I go word to word and explain the meaning, let me give the summary of what is being stated, then we'll go to the verses. Okay? The self, nature of Satchidananda. The mind and intellect, which are essentially inert. The mind and intellect are essentially inert. Essentially inert because they are also made up of matter. We don't have the experience of mind and intellect being inert. We don't have. Body inert, we have the experience. Somebody is sleeping, or even we ourselves when we are sleeping. Sometimes children get angry, two brothers get angry, or some friends get angry. The fellow is sleeping. You can't beat up that fellow when he is awake. When he is sleeping, I'll show you. All your anger you express sleep. A fellow is sleeping. He can't even. Body can. We have the experience of being inert. Inert means what? Inert means does not have the capacity to know, to understand the impulses and to respond to the impulses. That's called awareness. Sometimes a person may not be aware, for example, some physical disability, but at least the person is able to gain the impulses, to know what is happening. We never have the experience of mind and intellect being inert. We can only logically determine it is inert. How do we logically determine? We saw yesterday and today also in your group discussion, that point will be discussed by the Sevaks. It is inert because it is made up of the elements. Mind and intellect is made up of which aspect of the elements? Sattva aspect. Prana is made up of which aspect of the element? Rajas. Body is made up of which aspect of the element? Tamas. Individual jnanendriyas are made up of which aspect of the elements? Sattva, individual aspect of elements. Karmendriyas, each individual are made up of which aspect of elements? The Rajas individual. Prana, which aspect of the elements it is made up of? Rajas. The only difference is that all the Rajas aspects of all the 5 elements come together and create the prana. It is samashti. Samashti. Meaning what? Rajas aspect of space, Rajas aspect of air, Rajas aspect of fire, Rajas aspect of water, Rajas aspect of earth come together and create prana. In the same way, Sattva aspect of space, Sattva aspect of air, Sattva aspect of fire, Sattva aspect of water, Sattva aspect of earth, they all come together. Samashti. They all come together. And they create what? Mind and intellect. Mind and intellect is having the capacity to take the reflection of consciousness. And that reflected consciousness in the mind intellect is called jiva. That we know, this much we know. Now what is said here, the mind and intellect taking the sat and the chit aspects to take the ananda aspect, what is required is ananda maya kosha is required. Priya moda pramoda. Remember? In priya moda pramoda, ananda can get reflected. In the mind intellect, what is getting reflected? The sat and the chit aspects getting reflected. Okay? So you can imagine, just imagine. For the sake of understanding, let us create this example. The sun is there, and then you have a bucket. Then in the bucket you have water, right? You have water, and the reflection of the sun falls on the bucket of water. It falls everywhere. It falls on the water, but the water is able to catch the reflection. But what is happening? The top layer of that water, which is gaining that reflection, that becomes inextricably together. That becomes one, so to say. It falls. Everywhere light goes, yes. But the top layer, what happens? The top layer of water and the sun, they become together. They become together means what? They seem to coalesce. They seem to be together. In other words, the thoughts of the mind intellect, and the reflection of consciousness, they seem to become one. Samyojya, they become one. And then what happens? Now remember, mind and intellect by itself is made up of matter, and therefore they cannot by themselves have the capacity to know. But now when the reflection of consciousness is there on that, then the mind and intellect gets the capacity to know, understand. It will get the capacity to, let's say for example, fine, senses are seeing, mind and intellect, what happens? Goes through the senses, and then you have the experience of this is a glass. Essentially, mind and intellect is inert. It is only made up of matter, subtle matter. Okay, subtle matter, sattva aspect of matter. Fine, but still it is matter. Carbon, graphite. Carbon, also charcoal. Carbon, also diamond. But finally, what is it? It is carbon. It is carbon. In the same way, the material with which the mind is made, being nothing but the elements, the Panchamahabhuta, and the Panchamahabhuta are naturally, by nature, inert, and therefore they have no capacity to know. The mind and intellect is made up of the sattva aspect of the Panchamahabhuta, but because it has the capacity to get that reflection of consciousness, and the reflection of consciousness and that mind and intellect thoughts getting coated with that reflection of consciousness, gets now the capacity to know. Something clear? No problem, something clear. Thoughts, having the support of consciousness, gets the capacity to know. But remember, only thought cannot know. Only thought cannot know. Thought with consciousness coming together knows. Thought coming together with consciousness, meaning thought having that jiva-bhava, right? What is that thought having that jiva-bhava? That water in which there is reflection, that reflection is jiva, in the example, that reflection is jiva, and that reflection blesses the thought with the capacity to know. And then you see, once it blesses the thought, the capacity to know, buddhi knows. But what has happened? This thought, along with the reflected consciousness, has come together, and we have the experience, I know. Buddhi only is knowing. Reflected consciousness there gives the capacity to know. That reflected consciousness has the sense of I there. Buddhi knows. Reflected consciousness is I. How did reflected consciousness get the I? Because the self, pure satchidananda is that I. From that I, you have slipped to the level of the mind, and then you have become a mind-based I. Now, mind-based I, jiva, identifies with becomes one with the thought. Thought has the capacity, gets the capacity to know. Thought knows, but then what do we say? I know. Thought knows. How does thought know? Blessed by consciousness. How is thought blessed by consciousness? Because reflection falls there. It is able to catch the reflection. What is the nature of that reflected consciousness? Jiva. What is the jiva? I. Where did the jiva get the I? From the pure consciousness. Now, pure consciousness has slipped to the level of the mind, which is the individual. Okay, so thought, consciousness slipped, so to say, at the level of the mind, becomes the individual I, and this individual I blesses the thoughts with the capacity to know. So thoughts know. The function of thought is to know. Thought knows. Thought knows, for example, this is glass. This is the example we took. I'm sticking to the same example. Thought knows it is a glass. Thought knows it is a glass. But what do I say? I say, I know. I didn't say thought know. I say, I know. How does that I know happen? I know happens because of the consciousness being present in the thought as the I. And this I and that thought has become inextricably together. Like how the reflected light and the water becomes inextricably together. Do you understand the word inextricably? Inextricably means what? You can't separate it. Intellectually, you know, light and water are separate, but experientially it has become one. So how do you explain the experience we all have? For example, now you say, I'm thinking. If you have understood, you say, I understand. Right? How do we get that experience? Buddhi understands. Why should I say I understand? Because I and the buddhi has come together. But buddhi, buddhi does it have the capacity to know? No. Inherently it has no capacity to know. And the reflected consciousness actually is different from buddhi. Reflected consciousness should not say I know. Reflected consciousness should not say I know. It gives the capacity to buddhi. But knowing is done by buddhi only. Buddhi knows, but it has no actual capacity to know. When buddhi knows, the reflected consciousness says what? I know. Are you getting what is happening here? So I know, then after some time I will say, I know, but then now I want to explain. So I want to, then I explain. Now, see, explaining who's talking? The mouth is talking. The buddhi is explaining. But what do I say? I say, I know, I explain, I understand. So many things. Then after some time I get up and walk, and then I will say, I'm walking. After some time I will say, I'm going to sleep now. I'll say, I'm sleeping. So many things I'm saying, I. And in each one of them, the doing is not done by the I. The doing is done by the senses. The doing is done by the buddhi. The doing is done by the mind. All those things are happening. But everything I am putting it to the ego, the individual, the jiva. And I say, I know, I sit, I get up, I do this, I do that, etc., etc. All kinds of things I am saying. But actually they are done by what? They are done by the senses, mind and intellect. They are done by the senses, the mind and intellect. But senses, mind and intellect by themselves do not have the capacity to know. They are getting the capacity from the reflected consciousness. That reflected consciousness is the jiva, the individual I. But the individual I actually is not doing anything. It is only giving the capacity to know or capacity to do. But then what is happening? It is also identified. with the buddhi. It has become one with the buddhi. In other words, the identifying consciousness is the jiva. Its nature is to identify. It cannot help it. Jiva will identify. It cannot help it. The sun, when it's getting reflected in the water, it will get mixed up with the water. How? It cannot avoid. Are you understanding? But it serves a purpose. What is the purpose? The mind, intellect, the senses and all become functioning and functionable only because of this. If it were not happening, they cannot function. And when they are functioning, because it is identified with this, then what will happen? It will also say, when the buddhi is knowing, it will say, aham janami, I know. Aham ghatam janami, I know the pot. After some time it looks in the wall. I see the wall, I know the wall. I read the book. Bhavam Atmabodha book. So many times I say, I do this, all these things are what? Are the jiva identified with the mind intellect first. That is where it is falling. Actually, the pure self has no modification whatsoever. It is the pure witness. The buddhi by itself cannot know by itself. The jiva who is coming in between, the self, the mind intellect, the in-between fellow, the jiva, what does the jiva think? Because of its identification, the jiva thinks, I am the knower, I am the seer, I am the smeller, I am the toucher, I. So it keeps on saying, I. It is I. It is I. It is the self descended at the level of the mind as I. But what is happening? But it cannot be helped. Yes, it cannot be helped. But what is happening? It identifies with the buddhi because it is fallen there. When the reflected consciousness falls on the water, it gets mixed up with the water. And the water, and when the mind and intellect and all gets the capacity to understand or do or think or see or hear, smell, touch, etc., through the senses when it functions, then this jiva will have to say, I am the seer, I am the smeller, I am the toucher. This jiva will have to be like that. Nothing can be done. Because when the reflected consciousness falls on this, it will get identified and it will do all those things, and therefore what happens? I am seer, I am smeller, I am hearer, I am toucher will be natural. It cannot be avoided. It cannot be avoided. Jiva cannot avoid it. So Swamiji, then there is no possibility for liberation because I am the seer, hearer, smeller, toucher, knower. There is only one thing required. What is that thing required? Understand, you are not the jiva, but you are the pure satchidananda. Now what has happened is that we have taken the jiva to be the Atman. We have taken jivatma to be the actual Atman. I am satchidananda Atman. I am not jivatman. When the mind and intellect goes to sleep, you don't have the experience of jivatma. Is it not? In deep sleep, are you a man or a woman? Nothing. In deep sleep, are you a knower, seer, hearer, smeller, toucher? Nothing. You are not. This jivatma comes to the fore. It comes to be experienced with the mind intellect and goes back with the mind and intellect. And the jivatma will be like this. You can't help it. The sun falls on the water, it will get mixed up with the water. The same way, consciousness at the level of the mind and intellect reflected is the jiva. The jiva is identified with the upadhis, and jiva has got all these experiences. The only mistake that we do is to consider the jivatma to be the satchidananda, meaning jivatma to be the self. I am not the jivatma, I am the shuddha paramatma. I am not the individual, I am the pure satchidananda. This is what is to be done. Mistaking the rope to be snake, one suffers all fears. You know this example, right? In semi-darkness, you see a rope, but you are not seeing the rope. You have vaguely seen it. And once you vaguely see, when you do not know it is a rope, mind will project. If there is fear, it will project snake. If there is, let's say for example, if you have love for some garland or something, like I say, you think garland. Whatever it may project, it will project. Okay? Our own inadequacies leads to the projection. Mistaking the rope to be snake, one suffers unnecessary fear. Mistaking the rope to be snake, one suffers unnecessary fear. Mistaking oneself to be this jivatma, one suffers. Bondage is taking oneself to be the self, I am, the pure self. But what were we doing? We are taking ourselves to be jiva. Give up the notion that you are jiva and become liberated. These are the 3 verses. Swamiji, now you please tell in essence what these 3 verses are. The first verse says what? The self gets reflected in the buddhi and becomes inextricably mixed together. And inextricably mixed together, you have these notions, I know, I see, I hear, I smell, I touch. The first verse. First verse. So first verse is telling what? The self gets reflected in the mind intellect, becomes inextricably mixed together. And then you have the notion, I know, aham janami, aham shrunomi, I hear, aham sprishami, I touch, all these things. But when you are saying, I know, I hear, I smell, you are telling I, na? I is satchidananda, no. That pure self has no change whatsoever. You can't say that pure self knows, that pure self sees, that pure self touches, nothing. Nothing is there. And really speaking, the buddhi also by itself cannot know. But in between what happens, there is this individual which comes about. Which individual is that? That reflected consciousness. Not the true I, but the false I. The small I, not the actual I. Not the capital I, but the small I. This jiva knows so many things because it is associated with the buddhi. And associated with the buddhi, it has all the experience of what? I know, I see, etc. And that way, there is delusion. Now what is to be done? You understand what is the problem. What is the problem? We have taken ourselves to be jiva. Atmanam jivaha nyatva. We have taken ourselves to be jiva. And then the whole problem of samsara is there. Bhayam vahet. We suffer. If you take the rope to be snake, you will have fear. You have taken unnecessarily yourself to be jiva. And then you are suffering. What should be done? Naham jivaha. I am not jiva. Paratma iti. I am that pure self. In this way, if you know, nirbhayo bhavet. You will become fearless. The mistake is only one. I have taken myself to be jiva. As a jiva, there will be all kinds of modifications, all kinds of problems, all kinds of happiness, all kinds of sorrows will be there. Why? Because that reflected consciousness is identified with the mind and intellect. And mind and intellect will have all these experiences. These experiences will come to the jiva. Why? Because it is identified with it. It will be there. Jiva will go through all difficulties, will have all problems. It can't be avoided because it is identified with the mind and intellect. It is inextricably mixed together with the mind and intellect. But what is the mistake? I have taken myself to be this jiva. This is the problem. What should be done? If you have taken the rope to be snake and then you are suffering, what should be done? Understand it to be the rope and then be rid of all fears. In the same way, understand yourself to be the pure self and be rid of all sorrows. So first verse says how the consciousness comes together with the mind intellect. Second verse says, in truth the self, when you say I know, I hear, I smell, in truth the self is only a witness. It doesn't have all these modifications. I am happy, I am sad. It doesn't have any. It is only a witness. But the jiva will know all those things and it will go through all these delusions of I am seer, I am smeller, I am toucher, I am joyous person, I am sad person, based on actions and based on results. It will go through ups and downs, cannot be avoided. That is the second verse. And what is the third verse? The third verse says, the actual problem is taking oneself to be jiva. That is the actual problem. And what is the solution? Understand yourself to be Paramatma, not Jivatma. Paramatma, Jiva Atma means what? Individual self. Jiva Atma, individual self. What is Paramatma? Supreme self. What is Supreme Self? Satchidananda Swarupa. This is the solution. So in these three verses, Shankaracharya has given the whole description of the problem, the mechanism of the problem. First is the mechanism of the problem. First verse. And then he says, what is the fact? The fact is you are Paramatma. You don't have any of these changes. The jiva will have the changes. The third verse says that what? The problem is you have taken yourself to be jiva. The solution is that understand yourself. I am not the jiva. Naham jiva. Paramatma. Paratma. I am Paramatma. Jnataschet, if you know, nirbhayo bhavet. You can become free of all problems. You become fearless. Shall we read the verse? Now let me just go through the verse, you see. Atmanah sat-chid-amshah. The self's sat-chit aspect. Buddheh vrittih, the mind and intellect, its thoughts. Samyojya avivekena, inextricably they come together. And then what? Janami, meaning aham janami, I know. Iti pra-vartate, we have the experience. Really speaking, Atmano vikriya nasti. The pure self has no question of I know, I hear, I smell, I touch. The pure self has nothing of this. Why? It is pure sakshi, illumining everything. And also speaking, buddheh bodha na jatu iti. Buddhi by itself, because it is made up of matter, can never actually know. Then where all these things are happening? It is happening at the level of the jiva. Jivaha sarvam alam nyatva. Jiva knowing this and that and everything like this. What happens? The jiva has the experiences of I know, I am the nyata, I am the drashta, I am the seer, I am the knower, nyata, I am sukhi, I am dukhi. All these experiences the jiva has. Third, next verse you see. Rajju-sarpa-vat Atmanam jivo nyatva bhayam vahet. You are carrying all those fear and problems and troubles on your head. How? Like how the person who has seen the rope but not actually fully seen the rope but considers it to be a snake and then suffers, in the same way you are suffering now. What do you mean in the same way you are suffering now? I have taken myself, the pure Satchidananda, to be this limited, suffering, problematic jiva, which has fallen at the level of the mind and intellect. So what should be done? Naham jivaha. I am not this jiva. Paratma, I am the pure self, Satchidananda. Jnataschet, if you come to experience, realize, not just understand. Now you understand. After understanding, you come to experience it. Jnataschet, Atmabodha you get. Then what will happen? Nirbhayo bhavet. One will become fearless. That's all. These three verses you understand, you have understood Atmabodha. These three verses you don't understand, you have not understood Atmabodha. So put your full effort to understand. Okay. Shall we close? Yes. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.